Hi, I'm Olivia Yellen with the LTV Community Intern Project here with Minerva Perez. Ms. Perez is the Executive Director of OLA, an organization that advocates for community through education and collaboration to encourage policy at a local level for the protection of human dignity. Ms. Perez, thank you for being here today.
I'm very happy to be here, Olivia. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about the origins of OLA and how the organization will benefit East Hampton?
Sure. So OLA actually was formed as a 501c3 nonprofit back in 2002, and it was formed in East Hampton, which is kind of cool, by a few people who thought that things could be a little bit better. They were concerned about some not so equal access to different things, whether it be housing, some concerns around employment and safety. And so they formed OLA, and one person in particular, Isabel Sepulveda de Scanlon, is our vice president of the board. She's one of the founding people of OLA, and she's fabulous. So it was formed in East Hampton, and it has expanded out very quickly to be all of East End of Long Island. So we are OLA of Eastern Long Island, and the work that we do, especially at sort of lasting policy level and conversations and sort of deep interest in how our villages and our towns and all of the institutions within the East End, such as education, law enforcement, healthcare, mental health, transportation, all of these areas that we're taking a deep look at to make sure that everyone who's living out here can be equally served and protected and cared for with regard to those institutions.
So yeah, one of my primary concerns is that there are not enough opportunities for residents to be involved in the community regarding decision making and sharing ideas concerning quality of life, which you said OLA definitely addresses. So what is your experience in terms of addressing this issue, and would you suggest to enable and encourage residents to have more of a voice in governance?
That's a great question. I think honestly, what we can see across the board is that a lot of our public, regardless of where they're coming from or what language they're speaking, there is this sort of numbed experience that people are having with regard to government, local government, national government, whatever the case may be. So what I think is important here is that we are definitely not spending time kind of slapping communities around that aren't participating enough, like, well, how come you're not there? Or how come you didn't run for board, the school board? How come you didn't do this? How come you, what we need to do is kind of look at some of the structures that exist and acknowledge how we can do better in terms of how are we welcoming people, fully welcoming them to these tables where decisions are made? How are we getting information out about certain referendums that might be happening? How are we making sure that, and whether that's, Latino members of the community or whether that's youth, youth have a vested interest in making sure that this community also can exist for them, that they have a way to live here, that they have a water quality that is correct for them, that they are looking at how the environment is being served. I mean, youth that I work with have such a strong connection to what's happening with our environment, and yet there's a sort of disconnect about where they get to put their voice in the mix. And it's very important that we acknowledge that we could do so much more as leaders, as community-based organizations, and as elected officials.
Yes, so that definitely leads me into my next question. Would local meetings or school information sessions be a reasonable solution to influences like political party interest overriding community programs, which would affect youth or vulnerable groups in East Hampton?
I love that idea of having schools play a more major role in being conduits of information. And that way, you're not talking about a partisan influence. You're talking about, hey, there's going to be a referendum. Hey, there's going to be this thing going on at the town. And it's important for you to go, and you should get credit for that. Take a part, take an interest. Some of these meetings, I think, are still even happening in a hybrid context. There are ways that students can be involved, and I think schools should be a conduit for that type of information.
Absolutely. And do you have any other solutions that you believe to be valuable to involve local and summer residents jointly to support all members of the East Hampton community?
I love that. I think that in the way that sometimes certain members of communities can be either marginalized or kind of, that type of thing, I got to tell you, I think summer communities community members have the same thing. And there can be people that are absolutely vested and excited about making sure that this community is one that is, I mean, they came out here for a reason, you know, it's beautiful. Not everyone wants to trash this community and just use it up. There are people that are summer members of our community that are awesome. Find ways, be creative, get them involved. You know, what brought them out here? And if it has to do with the environment or water quality or beach access or whatever you want, then engage them as well. Don't just cut them off, or don't cut anyone off. If someone's living out here and making this part of their community and making an effort to be here, then count them as one of the voices that you should be engaging with.
Yeah, and to continue off of that, with worker exploitation and workers in East Hampton and local supporters of the community, is there a new approach you would suggest to combat workforce exploitation with OLA or any other organizations involved?
I would like to broaden that out a little bit and include housing exploitation. And where it all boils down to is kind of equal access to protection and to the laws that exist. And by saying that, I'm not saying that people are being barred from access to protection. I think our local law enforcement agencies, we've got 10 of them across the East End, and that's not even including the state troopers, so that's 11. But in terms of a person having access to go to law enforcement and say, listen, you know, I think this is going on. I think that I'm being mistreated in my work, you know, place. I think that I'm being trafficked, or I have been illegally locked out, or I'm in the process of, I think, experiencing an illegal eviction. Going to our local law enforcement is critical. At the same time, OLA works with law enforcement to make sure that some of the guidances that have been given and some of the laws that have changed. Like an example, a law has changed in 2019 to make an illegal lockout a crime. It is a misdemeanor. It is something that can be charged. So a landlord locking someone out physically, changing the locks, or shutting off a key utility such as electric or the heat in the middle of the winter, that constitutes an illegal lockout. It is a crime. And sometimes what we have to be careful of is making sure that that is really taken very seriously, because if it continues to be a tactic that landlords, whether they be Latino landlords or not, are using against their tenants, then it works. If they're not going to have any sort of consequence to that action, it's going to work. They're going to use that tactic over and over again. And so we'd like to see that kind of tide change a bit. So we're working with local law enforcement right now. We're working with the DA on certain cases to say, hey, listen, let's take a look at how we can make sure that that doesn't become just a tactic that gets used, because many people that are victimized by that tactic will never go to law enforcement. They're not even going to go to OLA. They're just going to run because they don't even know that they have rights. They don't even know that there's a crime that's been committed and that they have every right to have that crime charged.
Absolutely. And lastly, what message do you have to the audience and your hopes for the future of our community?
Okay. Let me see. Maybe we have time with that one because we have a little bit more time to talk about that. So I would say that the hopes of the community, I'm excited about anyone that's going to take the time and watch this interview that you've put together. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time and making the effort to do this. And I'm really excited about this intern project as well. I feel that where I stand and where OLA puts itself out there in terms of sort of the aspirations that we have for a healthy, a safe, a prosperous, an informed, an empowered community is something that we feel exists for our full community. So we don't want to carve out, even though OLA is historically and will always be a Latino focused organization, what we found ourselves able to do is use our inclusive approach on some topics that we just bring a lot of love and a lot more sort of robust action to that serve the greater community. And I want to give an example of that, since I think I have a half second to do it, is that mental health. So mental health access for adolescents. We have been involved in that space now for a while, for at least 6 years now. And recently we launched something called Youth Connect. And Youth Connect is a mental and emotional health access and support initiative that is something that we're doing for the entire community. We are right now in East End schools, and we are doing workshops on better ways to cope, on how people are dealing with, really great stress, great stress, and how are they handling that, and where the access points are to clinical mental and emotional health support, because there are a lot of gaps there, and not just gaps in Spanish, but gaps in English. So right now we're running a support line that exists 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. in Spanish and in English, where a member, a middle schooler or a high schooler could text us and say, hey, I'm having a bad day, or I'm in absolute crisis. And we have crisis counselors that are standing at the ready to text back and respond and guide that person, give them support as a local organization, because we understand the challenges around the local arrangements out here. Transportation is very difficult, public transportation. Access to mental and emotional health support, access in Spanish is very hard. Not all young people feel that they can go to the trusted adult that everyone else thinks that they should go to. They might not feel that connection, and we don't want to pull them away from real connections that exist, but we want to be there as that sort of in-between space. So we are answering a lot of texts at night, during the day, during the middle of a school day, when a student goes into the bathroom and texts, I'm having a really bad moment right now. So, and we're in the schools giving these workshops, and we're also committed to working with adults and caregivers so that we could build up their capacity for understanding what the needs of the adolescent in their lives, what those needs really are, and to stop making these kind of snap judgments around anxiety. Who's got anxiety? You're not paying the mortgage. Those kinds of comments, how debasing they can be and how hurtful they can be. And what we want to do instead is make sure that youth voices are really being supported and brought up, because every time I ask someone in middle school or in high school, hey, listen, here's a big problem: housing, transportation, whatever it might be. What's a solution that you might offer? Every single time I'm given the most amazing answer. I'm never given some off-the-cuff lame answer. So the reality is that our youth are thinking about these things all the time, but they're not being heard. And we can't only look to who is the student president, and which that's great that people have taken the time to run for those offices in high schools and all that. But how are we capturing the voices and the interests and the concerns and the possible solutions of our younger people? And because we're not doing enough of that right now. So a lot of OLA's focus in everything that we're doing, certainly Youth Connect is a main one because of mental and emotional health access. But beyond that, what's happening with every other aspect of leadership? What's happening with people being engaged as voters, as vote influencers? So even if you're only 14 years old and you can't vote yet, I bet you there's someone in your circle that loves you and cares for you that probably can vote. Talk to them. Talk to them about what you think matters. Have them take your interests in and maybe do a vote on your behalf.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and thank you for your great work and what you do for the community. And also thank you for the LTV Community Intern Project for giving me this opportunity. Once again, I am Olivia Yellen, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you.